So the start of the year is when we look forward to what we can achieve this year, but we also reflect on what happened last year. And I had a fantastic 2018 on the markets. But more importantly, how did I do that, and how should that influence what you are attempting to do in the markets? That's what I'm going to talk about in this video. If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. Or why not visit our website, where you can download a free trial of BetAngel Professional, but also visit the forum, where you can get detailed images, examples, and downloadable files. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So I have had a fantastic 2018, much bigger than I suspected. I more or less doubled the number that I did in 2017. Which was a bit of a surprise, sort of, because there are some mitigating factors. There are some things out of my control that contributed to that, some things that are in my control that contributed to it. And I also expect that in 2019, I'm going to have a lower year, but I will come on to why in a second. But I did also manage to get a record week during the year as well. And you would have noticed that I don't think I have talked about that before, but I always feel that the exceptional results, the really big weeks, the really big individual races and stuff are outliers for me now. So, when they occur less frequently, but they're also generally outsized to what you would see on an individual basis. So I generally don't talk about them. Why? Because I just think, well, it's not likely to occur, it's not regular, and I think that would be a little bit misleading. And I'm not sure that there is anything to gain by posting an absolutely ginormous P&L. I think it's much more relevant if you show a more ordinary P&L, although sometimes it's easy to get carried away. But it's funny actually, in that all of, having just had such a fantastic year, one thing that hasn't changed over all of the years is the amount of criticism and the amount of negative comments that you get. And one thing I will say to you that's important right at the front of this video is, if you have a passion, if you want to do something and you're good at it, just pursue it. Don't care about what anybody else says, because it should make no difference. One mistake I made back early on in my career is caring about that. It's not something that you should necessarily concern yourself with. If you're good and you're doing a good job with what you do, just do that. Ignore everything else around you. And the problem is it works even less for me, because, as I've said in previous videos, throughout my entire life, all I've had are barriers thrown in front of me, and I've crushed each one of them. And that's what I intend to do for the rest of my life. Is nothing's going to stop me. I will just carry on doing what I am good at. And I've learned that if you focus on that, and you keep your focus, and you're not distracted by what anybody else is doing or saying, that's the way that you go. That's how you become successful. If you overly concern yourself with other people and their opinions, then you will fade away. It's not the sort of mindset that you need to be successful, especially when you're trading. When you're trading, you need to be very focused on what you're doing and push forward on that, and forget everything else. And it makes no difference. I think this is one of the great things that I've learned since I've been doing this, is you can't argue with fools. And somebody will say something and you'll say, well, no, actually this is the case. And they say, well, what makes you say that? Well, you're bound to say that because. And it's like, well, no, I'm saying it because it's a fact and I've done it. But every year this gets reinforced to me. Every year I learn that to ignore that and to just plow on and do what you know is right, and forget everything else. So yeah, there's my first message for you, is if you're doing something and you're focused on it, you're going to put a lot of energy and effort into it, and focus on it and make it a success, regardless of what anybody else says. Because generally speaking, people are there to stop you and halt you, and they won't be able to see it from your viewpoint, and you won't be able to argue against it. So yeah, same thing happened again in 2019. 2018. And it's going to happen in 2019 as well, I'm sure of it. Despite all of the success that I had in 2018, you are still going to get your critics, but it makes no difference to me now. I really don't care and have any time of the day for anybody that wants to do that. If you, as people know out there, if you approach me and you talk to me sensibly, then I will try and accommodate you as best I can. Obviously I have very limited time, but I'm trying to at least give you some positive feedback and reinforcement on things that I know are correct, true, or of value. And that's hopefully what I'm going to talk about in this video as well. So yeah, I mean, how did I manage to achieve that in 2018? Well, the first thing to note is obviously it was a World Cup year, so you would expect to see a big bump during a World Cup year. You have this super cycle in sports that every 4 years peaks, and we had one of those cycles last year. So it would be surprising if I didn't do better in 2018 than I had done in 2017. And in 2019, I'm probably going to do a little bit worse than I did in 2018. Now, for me, that's probably guaranteed because I'm pushing the limits of what I can do all of the time. But if you're just starting out, then you're still going to be on that upward curve. For me, I'm pushing the edge and the boundaries of what is possible. So I rise and fall with the market. That's just inevitable when you get to a certain size where that's inevitable. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have a much lower 2019. But also, you know, it doesn't hurt to have lower expectations because you take the pressure off your shoulders. If you're constantly chasing down a target, especially when you're trading, then that can play tricks on your mind. So I prefer not to do that. I would just turn up to market, turn up to a week, a month, just do the best that I can and be satisfied with it and then move on. So, you know, if you are actively trading, that's what you should be doing. You should just be saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the best that I can and I'll take whatever result that comes out of the back end of it. And you tend to find that as you grow anyway, you fall into the cycle of the market and there's not much you can do about it. So yeah, that's been a big factor. It's interesting to look at the market if we reflect on what I saw in 2018. We've seen a lot of markets that are flat or declining slightly. But the net effect of that is that, you know, again, we saw, and I mentioned this last year when I did a summary video, that the amount of volatility that we're seeing in the market is rising. So the markets are getting tighter, they're getting more competitive and more, there's less money being lost in them effectively and therefore less money being won, if you understand where I'm coming from. They're much tighter, they're much more betting friendly. They're more efficient, I think is probably the word I should be using. But the average traded range is getting bigger and again it increased in 2018. So part of that is a reflection on if volumes decline or don't grow as they should, then that's typically the response that you'd expect from the markets. So the market's getting a little bit thinner and that increases volatility. So the markets are more efficient, but they're less efficient at the same time. But that in itself produces opportunities. So I've been running for a fair while a back strategy, I've been running a lay strategy, and I've added a few other things into the mix. Because when you look at pricing from 15 years ago, the market seemed to know what it was doing. But nowadays you see some really wild moves. So for example, if your role in the market was predominantly a scalper, you're probably finding that a little bit harder because that average volatility, the jumpiness within the market is quite high. However, if you're a trend trader, you're seeing bigger trends now. And if you're a value seeker, you're probably more likely to pick up value. So that's a trend that's permeated throughout the market. But the funny thing is, because most other exchanges sort of mimic or are close to what Betfair prices are, then you can deploy those strategies on those exchanges as well. I don't know whether the growth in other exchanges has diluted the market a bit or added to it, but my experience tells me that if you have multiples of one thing, it generally adds to it, but it may dilute it on an individual basis. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. The market grows, but maybe you're seeing declines in individual areas. So that was a characteristic that came out of last year, and that had a direct effect on the way that the markets operated. They're much more efficient now. Getting a back bet into a competitive handicap at Cheltenham in 2019, you're going to be able to do that at near to 100% book, which is crazy. But the price at which you get will wobble around a fair bit. So there are opportunities in there. Don't believe that all market changes are negative. If you look hard enough, you'll find an opportunity. I've used the analogy before. When you get new features within a product, when the market changes, it's not an excuse to chuck the towel in. It's like walking into a room, opening the door, looking around the room, seeing a door on the other side, and then opening that door as well. You just, one opportunity comes after another. Positive minds find opportunities, negative minds find problems. So when you look at how it was achieved, you know, part of it was out of my control. The World Cup generated a lot of activity. England had a good World Cup. All of those things sort of would lift the number overall. But also, one of the things and the philosophies that we've brought to the market is the constant development of BetAngel. BetAngel was created before there was an API. And we didn't turn up as the market was mature and think, well, here, let's create a product that we can flog to the market. It was created before the market even existed. And part of the philosophy that we have is that we're going to constantly reinvest money into the product as much as we possibly can. And the reason for that philosophy is manyfold. It's, many faceted is the word I was looking for. But one of the key aspects of it is I want to maintain my edge, and I want to grow my edge and look for new opportunities. So one of the benefits that you have if you're a customer of BetAngel is that one of the big benefits is that you can sort of leverage off of that. As you see the product develop and mature and take different directions, then you can piggyback on the back of that. Now, we have a lot of customers that give very valuable feedback to us in terms of ideas, feature suggestions, or things that we should do with the product, which we will take on board and integrate in there. But also, when we see opportunities that occur within the market, then we will push the product in that direction as well, so that you can benefit from those advances that we see within the market. And there have been a lot of advances, because when you go back to when BetAngel was a non-API product, when there was no API at Betfair, the problem that we had back then is, Betfair took a dim view of products that hammered their servers and refreshed at very high speed and did complex betting patterns. And it almost brought down the exchange before it had actually matured. So there was an article, I'll see if I can dig it out and stick it up on the screen, that was talking about how this was a problem for Betfair and how they were thinking of banning anything other than website traffic. And that's why the API was created. But the first iteration of the Betfair API was quite limited. It wouldn't do a great deal, and they had caps, they had data usage caps on products that were using the API. So you were really restricted in terms of what you could do. You couldn't call and get prices that often, you couldn't place that many bets. There were all sorts of issues surrounding it. So, we went from a non-API product to an API product, and then we had to get the product to work with the API. But there have been subsequent iterations of the API where we've upgraded the entire code base of BetAngel. You wouldn't have really noticed that because you generally see it from a feature perspective, but we've really upgraded the code base of BetAngel every time there's been an API change. But with every API change comes new opportunities. So this is why you see new features and enhancements to the product, and why you've seen the growth of the way that Guardian, because originally Guardian was just a way of listing markets. Then we added watch lists, automation, there are multiple Excel sheets and all sorts of other stuff to it. But we couldn't have done that without the progression of the API. So when you see us releasing new products, we're taking another step up that ladder, excuse the pun. We're pushing the product forward into new areas and allowing it to do new things. But part of that is reliant upon Betfair upgrading the infrastructure and releasing new APIs that allow us to do that. So, that's why you see the product getting upgraded constantly. We're not going to get stuck on technology that's 5-10 years old. We want it to be right on the cutting edge of everything that's possible. So in a rather long-winded way, that's brought me back to where that other growth has been in 2018. So if you look back at the videos from Q4 2017, you would have seen me talking about stuff that I wanted to do in 2018 and features that we'd introduced that would allow me to do that. And of course, you would have seen the growth of automation on BetAngel significantly over the last few years. We've really begun to push the boat out in terms of what that can do, especially with streaming prices and the latest API technology. That vastly increases the scope of what the software can do. So a big chunk of my growth in 2018 has come from automation. So I've always been able to trade very effectively manually, but throwing in automation into the mix has allowed me to increase the scope of what I do. So I can trade markets completely automatically in the background while I'm manually trading. And then what we did in Q4 2017 is we introduced servants, which plugged the gap between the two. Sometimes I know what I want to do and on what runner, but actually automation would do it better, so that's where the servants come in. You can create the little automated routine to get you in and out of a trade, or to highlight a trade opportunity to you and display that on the ladder, or to execute it for you. And then you can use the servant to say, well, this is the market I want to do it in, and I want to do it on this particular runner as well. So that fills the gap between being a fully manual trader and being a fully automated trader. That sits right in the middle. So even my manual trading now is taking on a new dimension because of the ability to do that, whether it's additional information that it displays, whether it's the trade execution or spotting opportunities. That has helped me pretty tremendously. So using a combination of those three things has turned my trading from being predominantly a manual trader 10 years ago, and I feel like in the last year what's happened is I have become a conductor of an orchestra. I'll turn up at the beginning of the day, I'll be looking at all of the things and the opportunities that are out there, assigning values to those bits of automation, then also working on markets directly myself. But all of that is going on all of the time, and I'm just keeping a watching brief on it as all of that unfolds in front of me, and making a decision on what I do and don't want to do, and when I do and don't get involved, and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I feel that my trading has evolved. It's gone up a huge level in the last year, simply because of all of the feature enhancements and additional capabilities that we've got within the product. If you're not using those, then I realise that you may be here and you're on that upward curve, but I suggest that that's where you sort of start heading and try to think about where you want to go with that. Because say, let's take a simple example. Say there's a strategy out there that you want to use that is well publicised, that you've seen other people using. Your role really should be looking at that strategy and thinking, how can I beat that person using that strategy? That's effectively what you're trying to do. If the strategy is semi-effective, then why can't you make it just that little bit more effective using all of those tools in front of you? And being able to execute faster, cleaner, more efficiently, without emotion or something, or spotting the opportunity, will allow you to do all of those sort of things. So I think you have to be pragmatic and realise that it is a competitive market. If you stand still in this market, you die. And I've seen it many times before. There have already been many iterations of people who've come in, made a bit of money, become quite well known, and then they just vanish out of view. And you see it repeatedly all of the time. So one of the things that I've been keen to do is to continually push forward in terms of my understanding of the market. I know the market really well. I know the way that the market works. I know why it works that way. I know the participants in the market. I look at all of those things to keep trying to understand how I can keep pushing forward and improve my knowledge within the market and what I do within the market. So yeah, that's been a big change for me in the last year, is that I've expanded the scale and scope of my trading fairly significantly, and that's been down to using automation servants and all of those functions within BetAngel that we've improved and enhanced over recent years. But that's only been possible because of changes to the Betfair API. Without those, we'd still be stuck on a version of BetAngel that was 5-10 years old, when in fact, if you haven't looked at BetAngel recently, it's changed fairly significantly over the last few years. And the great thing is we're going to keep on pushing that forward. We already know what we're going to be doing for the first 6 months of 2019. We have an idea of what we're going to do in the last half of 2019, but our view may shift and change depending upon what users want and what we can sensibly achieve. But yeah, we will continue to push forward. So that's what was behind my growth in 2018. Part of it was down to the markets and the World Cup. That's inevitable. But part of it was an evolution in terms of the way that I work. I'm using, I still trade manually, but I'm using semi-automation within there a lot more. But also I'm fully automating stuff as well. And there are some trading situations that just require manual trading, but obviously then you're missing out on these two other big chunks as well. So I realise it's quite a curve to go up if you've never done this before, but it's a path that I suggest you sort of start setting off on. So, if you've got your little niche that you're working on, think about how you can improve and nudge that forward, because not only will you probably produce better results, but you'll push yourself ahead of the crowd that's some way behind you, and they may not be using anything that is as clever as what you're able to do. So yeah, I'm expecting 2019 to be another year of progress. Will I match 2018? I don't think I will. I'd rather set expectations lower, knowing that I can't do it, and that may help me drive other scenarios and new things that I could discover over the course of 2019. But I'm not expecting it to be as big, because there's not going to be a World Cup, and I may not achieve some of those wonderful runs that I had in 2018 and some of those records that I hit as well. Maybe I'll get a negative record in 2019. I hope I don't, but you never know. You can't rule these things out. So I'm going to go into 2019 with the same attitude as happened previous years, but maybe slightly lower expectations. But the great thing is, there's plenty of things for me to do, there's plenty of things for you to do. We're going to keep on pushing the product forward, and that will allow you to do even more cleverer things in 2019.